this is some behind the scenes content for our Patreon. This week we're going to talk about speeders.
Yeah. So speeders, what is speeders, right?
Yes, what is speeders?
What are speeders? Okay, now what is speeders? Speeders is a comic I worked on after graduating art school. And no, I'm not going to say which art school. Many years ago. This is like in 2000. Well, I worked on it in 2005. I can't remember when I graduated anymore, but I started working on it in 2005. And at the time, I had a few other opportunities, but couldn't take them because my work permit didn't come in, and that's a whole other story. But speeders is in general, it's just a weird cyberpunk tale of a small business that happened to be a courier service that's trying to survive in the big city, and the big city in question is called New Verence City. It's pretty much just this weird story of these three people running this weird courier business, and they're either trying to avoid student loans or just paying rent, or just finding out who destroyed their martial arts school and killed their mentor. Typical things everybody deals with in everyday life. But we're not necessarily going to talk about the whole all-encompassing project right now. We wanted to kind of get a bit more, intimate with the book. Ooh, not that type of intimate. But we wanted to just, instead of going into, speeders, blah, 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 all this stuff. No, we're just going to get into some specific things. For example, the first page. And right now you should be seeing an example of what I'm talking about. And I mean, it's interesting because it's taken, like I said, 2005. That's a long time ago. Took 6 months to do this book. And if you're looking at this first page, it's a lot of detail. Like I put a lot of passion into it. I was working with Nate, who was the writer, and he was on one of the podcast episodes. And, it's something that, yes, we were very raw talents at the time, but I do think we put the best of us in this work. And I wouldn't say this is my best work now, but it's still work that I'm very proud of, if you understand what I'm saying. The pages as well are oversized. Any of you that are familiar with comics will look at this and say, wait, what's going on? This is insane. Like, comic pages are supposed to be 11 by 17, and these artboards that I have here, they're custom cut by myself, because at the time I was working on these in Jamaica. I went back home after school, and there were no stores selling comic book artboards which are 11 by 17, and I didn't remember the actual dimensions. So I'd asked my father, I was like, hey, if you see any artboard stuff, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So one day my father comes home with these poster board sheets that are like 28 by 22. And I mean, they're ridiculous. They're ridiculous. And I'm like, well, I just remembered comic artboards being large. And so I was like, I guess that's it. Maybe I'll just cut it in half and then it will be accurate. Little did I know I was still way overshooting the size and even the aspect ratio. Would you use aspect ratio for like pages? You wouldn't use that term, right?
Not necessarily, but I mean, I feel like you could cut the page in half and that would be closer to like a comic size.
Well, yeah, you're right. I could still trim it down, but I didn't realize that I didn't have a frame of reference. And the internet, yes, Google existed. The internet just didn't work the same way back then. Like, it's not like you think, I'll just type in comic artboard. You probably could have, but it's just back then you'd have to, you always still thought that, at least I still thought, well, I'd have to go to a library or ask someone. Anyway, it was kind of intoxicating saying I could work on something larger. So I ended up cutting the boards down to, was it 14 by 22 or something like that? And I didn't have any tools. So I was cutting these with knives sometimes. Like, I would just sharpen a knife and I would draw my line, because even my rulers weren't that big. Like, I had, like, a lot of my equipment and stuff was actually, I didn't get to bring it down with me. So I was using, I didn't really have those types of art supplies in Jamaica, and I didn't want to, like, they're expensive down there. So I was using knives, and like I would use whatever straight edges I could find. My father was an engineer and stuff, so he had tools here and there. But I don't think he wanted to necessarily lend me, his sophisticated, what you call it, implements to do whatever it was I was doing, because I know he didn't know what I was doing. He was just trying to be supportive. I figured it out, got these things, started penciling on them, and it was fun. It was great. And what was amazing is halfway through the process, I realized what I could do as well is that, like, these are going to get shrunk down, the pages, and they're going to look really good. That's kind of why you do comics at a larger size in the first place. It's so that when the art's shrunken down, then a lot of the details get more compressed.
So what kind of pencils did you use to draw this first page?
To be fair, I used anything I could get my hands on. I used the last of the supplies I had from school, whatever I could find in a store, whether it's a mechanical pencil or a random, 2B pencil used for an SAT. The whole philosophy of this was that I used whatever I could get my hands on. Like, the paper is a perfect example of that. It's not like Jamaica is some wasteland where you can't get art supplies. It's just that I didn't know, and I wasn't studying in Jamaica for that long. Well, I wasn't studying in Jamaica, period. So I just came back, and I'm still kind of like a foreigner in his own homeland. So I'm kind of reacclimating, and a lot of stuff I just didn't know where or what to get, and I'm happy that happened because it forced me to improvise, which is what I suggest to people. It's not about, a lot of kids will ask, oh, what type, or even parents will ask on behalf of their kids, what type of computer or markers or papers or whatever do I need? And it's like, you don't know, you just need whatever's in front of you. It's not about the tool. It's literally about what you can bring to the table. The rest can fall into place, and honestly, maybe this is not a popular opinion, but I'd say that the less tools you have available, the more likely you are to probably, especially if you can use the lack of tools to your advantage, the more likely you'll be able to master a lot of other tools after the fact when you do have access to them. The interesting example on this project is, while working on it, I wish there were screens you could draw on, which was pretty funny. While working, because I'm working on this futuristic thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be so cool if I could draw this on the screen, and then I could send it to my to Nate so he could see the pictures. Because at that point, smartphones aren't really around. When were smartphones around? Maybe I just didn't have one. But anyway, there was no, even if there were, and the camera phones that did exist were garbage. So it's not like I'm taking a picture of this and sending it to him. So I'd scan. Or you'd have to go to a Kinko's, which we don't really, that whole system doesn't work the same in Jamaica. So these pages that I told you, they're 14 by 22. That's probably the one problem I created for myself, because this whole book is 100 and something pages. So 14 by 22, 100 and something pages at this size. And I have actually some other smaller stories that now put this up to maybe sub 200 page story. And I can't scan this like on a regular scanner. Even I need a large scale scanner, which is expensive, and those I definitely couldn't have access to. So that was one thing that hindsight might have changed my decision, though I'm still happy they're this big. And while looking at it, you might have wondered what's with the discoloration on the because if you see anything without discoloration, that's the older file. The stuff with the discoloration is because it's been a while since I even used these pages. So in the many years that intervened, like I lived at a beach, and then we had water damage, and then well, you know where that's going. And unfortunately, it got into some pages, but the pages are still, viewable. They still work. They were still able to be inked, thankfully, and they're usable. But Nicole's really bored by this whole conversation, but it's fine. I'm used to it, and you're probably bored by this too. It's because she's like literally like yawning at me. It's like, yeah, move on. Do you have any questions?
How did you come up with some of these character designs?
You know what? It's very complicated to say because a lot of it was traditional. Just hey, let's brainstorm stuff. Let's look for what are we looking at. For example, Nate and I will talk about things, talk about what we're looking for, like what's inspired us. Like at the time, I think we both like were fresh off a Snow Crash. He's a big Warren Ellis fan. I like comics. He likes comics. So, I stuffed in little weird comic references. So that may have influenced some of the designs, the look at some of the characters. I do remember in one of the synopses that he shared with me, it said the city itself, because the city is a character. New Verence is a character as well. And he said it's Disneyland on crack. And I don't know if I achieved that, but I have my own ideas of. I mean, Disneyland already is on crack, right? I think it's. I'd never seen Blade Runner as well. That's another funny thing. I'd never seen Blade Runner ever. So you might look at it and say, "Oh, he must have liked Blade Runner and all this stuff." Nope. The only thing close to the Blade Runner universe I'd ever seen was Alien. Or aliens, whatever. So yeah, the look of the city was kind of just what I felt this type of stuff would look like. Also manga influenced. I'd say at the time I could think Snow Crash manga, Frank Quitely, anything Frank Quitely would do. Just a lot of disparate ideas. A lot of people when they look at the pencils said, "Oh, this reminded me of Mobius, who's a very prolific illustrator, French illustrator, the late Mobius." And I didn't actually know who Mobius was at the time. It was because of that comparison I learned who he was, and I was like, "Wow, I am dumb. How did I not know who this guy was?" But what's funny is I'd known his work, I just didn't know his name, and that was even more, sad. That was even more sad, sadder, I should say. But yeah, Mobius, I guess, would be in some weird way, Mobius influenced me, and his heavy metal work.
Did you enjoy drawing the architecture on this first page?
I'll tell you something. I was terrified of doing this. I didn't do backgrounds, and you can look at it and tell I don't do backgrounds. No, I was horrible. Like, it was something I was scared of. I didn't necessarily like drawing them. I didn't draw them much, but it's kind of played into my philosophy with everything, even the projects I take now. Just because I might not have an affinity or I don't draw certain things, I try not to have it steer me away from it. And it might sound counterintuitive because, drawing's supposed to be fun, but I like the learning aspect. I like the fact that this is issue 1, chapter 1, if you want, page 1 of that, right? I think by issue 5, chapter 5, whatever you want to call it, and the last page, which is like 22 or 24, I can't remember anymore. I think I've learned a significant amount. And there's a certain streamlined quality to how I start treating the background and treating the characters and how they interact and the growth. Within the 6 months it took me to draw all 100 and something pages, which is 5 issues or 5 chapters, whatever you want to call it. It was a very important thing in my growth as and I'm just an artist, but as a creator and as a creative person. It taught me a lot about how these things work, and I think it gave me a lot of respect for people who do tell stories. And we had a lot of big ideas that we wanted to come out of this, and at the time I was working on some games with a friend of mine who hasn't been on the podcast proper yet. But what's interesting is even at one point we were talking about maybe making a small game about this, as a little marketing push thing. But it's funny you ask about that. Like, you talk about the backgrounds and whatnot. One of the reasons why a lot of that stuff stopped is because I did all this penciling and I didn't ink it, because normally in American comics, what they've done is things are on an assembly line type thing. So you do the pencils, the inks, colors, whatever, right? I was hoping to get an inker somehow because that's just how I thought it worked. But I wish I took the Eisner approach. Well, I guess the Eisner approach would imply that I would write it as well. But the point is, I probably should have set out and just inked it myself off the bat, because after penciling all of that, it was hard for me to not accept the fact that when we tried to get people to ink it, they'd be like, "Oh no, it's too much work." And so it sat shelved for a long while. And, those buildings you asked about, nobody wanted to draw all those individual buildings that I decided to draw. Thankfully, we found one eventually. He's this crazy dude in Brazil named Tiago. Super talented guy. And, I could say crazy because he decided to ink this willingly. Paid him, of course, or paying him, still paying for that. But it's been a fun process getting to the point where we can see things move forward. You know what I mean? I probably showed you this when we met, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's her answer. That was exactly her answer when I showed her when we met.
Wow.
Okay, that's it.
Do you have a favorite character on this page?
I like that building, that giant building to the right next to the dome. Okay, I'll tell you my favorite things. It's hard to say favorite character. My favorite, because there are people that show up. Like, for example, in the bottom panel, or 1, 2, 3, 4. You're like, oh, I don't know. The whole panel comes down my own comic. So the fourth panel at the bottom, right? There are these guys facing off each other, and the one on the right side, he's Express Courier. That's the name of that company. Like the city is run by, well, not run, but the city has like all these weird warring factions, and one of the warring groups is like the courier groups, because because it's a high tech bustling city, and you're gonna be like, wait, this makes no sense, but just hear me out. And they rely on couriers, and I'll tell you why. For certain very important pieces of tech that you just don't want to fall into the wrong hands, right? So you'll be like, oh, can't you just 3D print it in the future and whatnot? Sure, but like I said, I'm treating these as very rare items. Let's say they're made out of things that you just can't, use, 3D printers to print. Get me? Whatever. Or it could be documents, whatever. But email and whatnot won't cut it, because online security just isn't that good. Point is, I really was proud of the design of the Express Courier guys. It kind of came out not nowhere. I had various influences, but it's been so long. Like, I have a sketchbook full of these drawings, but I just like the weird symmetry on the outfit and the lines, because I used a lot of lines, as you can say. Like, they literally have racing stripes on them, and I think it's kind of douchey. They have those weird, what do you call those helmets? Those helmets with the long backs. They look like alien, like alien queens. You might not know what I'm talking about. Like alien queen heads, how it's really long and extends back, like their helmets. And if you just look at the picture, you might be able to see some of it. But I was most proud of this design. And the next thing I was proud of in panel 2, I'm proud of this giant, like, weird tour bus truck thing with the people in it. It's under the bridge. You'll notice if you just look under the bridge. For some reason I like that. And I like all the weird random characters that might look like familiar characters. If you read any books with pictures, won't state which characters they might remind you of, but they're not them. It's just, I felt like I was just out of school, and look at how much stuff I put on this page. Like, this is ridiculous. And this is not me saying ridiculous as in I'm complimenting myself. I'm saying, what was wrong with this guy? You had friends. Why are you acting like you lived in a basement and didn't have anything else to do? You had friends. This is me speaking to myself and like some weird time capsule. I hope he listens to this and feels ashamed, and then watch as the page disappears from my hand. Because it was never drawn. Because self-esteem issues popped up. Do you have anything else you'd like to ask?
I like the size of this woman's lips in proportion to her face.
Which panel is that?
In the fourth panel, there's a woman whose lips are like half the size of her face.
On the right? Oh, I thought it was panel 3 at the bottom. Okay, so here's the thing. I have certain friends and associates have said, oh, why do you like drawing lips so much? I'm like, well, why don't you like drawing lips? There's so many characters with no lips. I don't get it. I'm a pro lip artist. You know what though? All right, and not to renege on what I just said. Love express design, but if we're gonna say character, my favorite thing, just looking at it now, is the lady in the bottom panel with the giant visor thing with the V-cut top and the cape. I think it's so weird, but it's like I can see somebody wearing that in the future. It's so ridiculous. I mean, that's me, bottom panel. But yeah, that's our behind the scenes on Speeders. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully it was educational. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I don't know. You have any take on that? Wow.
No, I learned a lot.
Like what?
No, that you were terrified of doing backgrounds. I would never know that.
Or doing a project.
Yeah, these insane backgrounds. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not terrified of doing backgrounds now. I like doing, like, I love the end result when I put the time in. It's something though that I would say if you are interested in art or you do comics, I would say it's something to be careful of though. You can sometimes waste time and a lot of effort on backgrounds that are not going to enrich a story. It's a great vanity project because this whole thing was a vanity project at the end of the day. You can see youthful exuberance all over it. You know, I'm drawing details that don't need to be drawn. Because for one, they're going to get covered by word bubbles anyway. Or two, they're not relevant to the story and they don't help propel it forward. They're great to look at, but at the end of the day, you have to think about your time and you have to think about what it is you're trying to achieve. Nothing's wrong with doing a vanity project. But if that's not the ultimate goal, then you might want to rethink that. And that's one thing I've learned looking at these. Like if I were to give you a con, like I'm not going to, if I'm not like praising myself for, oh, what's my favorite character and why did I choose to draw in such a large size? It's like I made a ton of mistakes doing all 100 and something pages, but I wouldn't change it because I learned so much. I would love to draw at this size again, but I've been deterred for the past 2 decades just because, well, no, not 2 decades, decade and change, because it's just one of those things where the scanning capabilities, like if I had a large scale scanner, like to scan these cost a bit of money. Like Kinko started charging for they started charging by I forgot square foot, and I was like, that makes no sense. Not everybody is scanning plans. Before you could just scan and then it would cost like what? It would cost me like $1 or something. I don't know. It didn't cost a lot. It didn't cost as much as I thought it would have. But that's now become prohibitive, and I'm not spending $3,000, maybe $10,000 on a large scale scanner for what? It would just be for this. I mean, I guess I could provide that service. Not interested. Anyway, so thanks again for listening, and hopefully you took something away from this and you like the art. I'm hoping to in future, maybe I'll even put up because we have some PDFs of the rough text, all that stuff you can maybe read at some point, but I have to talk with Nate, see how that works, and we'll talk to you next time.